Good morrow, my darlings, and a very warm welcome back to The Library is Open. So I hope you brought your library cards, my darlings. So here we are in the new year. It's 2023. If anybody's watching this from a time capsule, if so, go and watch someone more interesting. But if you happen to be here because you enjoy this channel and you like me sometimes talking about the work that I do, then sit back, pour yourself a nice cup of tea, and get settled. Don't know how long this is going to be. It might turn into a little bit of a ramble or a wool gather, as the lovely Charles Heathcote would call it. I'll link him in the description. I'm a proper YouTuber now after a couple of years on this platform. I'm linking people. I'm not doing cards because I do it all from my phone, just to be honest with you. But everything you usually need to know will be in the description. So those eagle-eyed of you who watch my channel regularly will notice that I'm wearing the same outfit as I wore in a previous video. That's because I'm doing what we call stacking content. So I've got a free day, so I'm filming quite a few videos in the same day, and then they'll release as we go. Because we've all got busy lives, haven't we? So today, what I thought might be quite interesting, it's a kind of, not really a sequel, but a kin fellow, if you will, to a video I've done previously, is talk about a piece of writing that I have done that is going to be on stage. For those of you who are new joiners, new starters, new book sniffers to the channel, you may not know that my day job, well, I've got several, but my main day job is as a university lecturer, where I lecture in performance and outside of that, in my own practice, I am a performer and a playwright. And I am an associate artist with a company called Threedumb Theatre, who are based pretty much all over the country. In fact, it is a company that started at the school that I teach at, and I've been working with them for several years now, and I've done some writing for them. The most recent prior to this that I did for them was an adaptation of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which was filmed, well, live streamed, I should say, in a continuous one-shot. It's like a really specific style of filmmaking that is, it happens live, but it's streamed rather than being experienced in person. And I will link Threedumb down below so you can go and have a look at their work. And I'm about to embark on, or rather they are, with the material I've created, another one of these live streams, which will take place at the end of January. And this is based on Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or to give it its original name, Notre Dame de Paris. Now, Stephen, who is one of the founding members of Threedumb, asked me quite a while ago now, I think it's over a year ago, to have a look at adapting this into a small-scale version. Now, I'm fascinated by adaptations. I think that there's a great gulf, not necessarily a negative gulf, between the written word and then its existence in other forms. You know, we see this a lot with classic literature, don't we? Where things get adapted into ballets or operas, or inspire concept albums for music, or, you know, TV shows, so on and so forth. And, you know, there's often that view, isn't there, that an attempt to use the same source material has a negative impact on the original. But what I'm here to say is, like, the original will always still exist, and you can experience this in whatever format you prefer to experience it in. You know, they can be companion pieces rather than rivals, I suppose, is my disclaimer there. So yeah, Stephen asked me to have a look at creating a suitable adaptation for The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is, it's a hefty text, it's a chunky boy, is this. This beautiful edition, by the way, is the seasonal edition, I think it's called. I think they're called the Seasons edition, spring, apparently. And for those of you who don't know, it chronicles the fortunes, or rather misfortunes, of Quasimodo, who is an orphan who was left in the cathedral at Notre Dame and raised by Frollo, who is the kind of priest reverend there. I'm not a huge knowledge of religion as to his specific position. And he falls in love with a traveller girl called Esmeralda, who has a goat, and is, you know, but the priest is also in love with her. and things are unlikely to end well. Let's just say it there. You may be familiar with the Disney version as well, which added in the gargoyles, which is delightful as a storytelling narrative kind of chorus device. Anyway, so obviously with a book of this size, condensing first of all to the kind of main plot points is how I first approached this, because, you know, and I don't want to have a go at old literature because the styles were very different and people's access to and how they consumed media was very, very different. But there is a lot in this that is not really about the story. That's not necessarily a read, because I don't want to read it too harshly, I should say, because, you know, in some ways it is, because it's setting and so on and so forth. But there is a big watch of this book that is basically a history of Paris and its cathedrals, which is interesting if you're interested in that. And being what it was, a kind of epic story, it also has a lot of subplots and kind of extraneous characters, extraneous to a live action version, I should say. You could people this with as many characters as Les Miserables, incidentally also by Victor Hugo, but I didn't want to do that for several reasons. You know, when we're looking at creating theatrical performance stuff, money always has to be a consideration. Can't afford to put shows on of that size anymore without a sizable budget. And two, because it felt like the style of filmmaking lends itself to an intimate, kind of almost claustrophobic feel, where if you want to build the tension, we can't really afford to be palatial with the settings and so on and so forth. And very sort of gentle. There is room for that in other kinds of performance or filmmaking, whatever, but not here. The fact that it is one shot means it needs to remain immediate. It needs to take place essentially in one location, or, you know, several locations that are served by one specific place. So with that in mind, the show is on at, or rather it's being broadcast from the Space in London. The Isle of Dogs, I should say. And so I knew that, given the dimensions of the building, which I looked at originally, I thought this will double for the Cathedral at Notre Dame, which is essentially the Gothic masterpiece, the Gothic kind of central character in a way, a non-animate central character. So I was like, okay, it needs to be this. And Stephen and I talked very early as well about how we weren't too tied to going completely with the novel in terms of where it ends up, because I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but it's not necessarily a satisfactory ending, and you do sort of have to think about that sometimes. It's the whole balance when you're creating stuff, isn't it? You have to go with what you actually want to say versus what people want to consume. So that's an ongoing argument and thought process, as it were. But so actually, funnily enough, the very first draft of the show I did was an ending that I kind of went with, that Stephen and I then had subsequent discussions about and slightly altered to give a kind of potential hope for the future, again without spoiling it. So I also knew that we had to reduce dramatically the kind of, or rather speed up the process of everything. So in the book, there's a lot about Esmeralda being blamed for the murder of her lover, who is not of her class, by the way. But it turns out actually that somebody else did it. But obviously there's the protracted court case and so on and so forth and everything. And I thought, no, what we need to do is skip straight into the middle of this, get rid of the scene setting, and we need her, when we open the show, to start that tension, to really sustain that journey, particularly in this format. We need her to be on the run straight away in something visually striking. You know, we need to see her ostracized from Paris society. I mean, she's already ostracized by the fact that she's a traveller, and prejudices of the time, and, well, still this time as well, kind of fill in the gaps as to what her character is, not based on who she actually is as a person or what she's done. You know, she's kind of tarred by the fact that she is what she is, or her background is what she is, irrespective of whether she's guilty of anything. And, you know, we'd all do well to remember that in 2023 as well, wouldn't we? So, yeah, it had to start there, and I wanted something visually striking. So it actually begins outside of the theatre, and we follow Esmeralda blood-soaked and desperate, where she seeks refuge in a sanctuary, which is, you know, at the time was, I'm not sure if it is still permissible, you can seek refuge from the authorities and stuff in religious buildings. And then that's where I have to thank the Mickey Mouse Company for suggesting the idea of the gargoyles as a kind of chorus. And I knew that I wanted to create a kind of, or use, I should say, a kind of gargoylean, it's not a word, I made that up, figure called Striga, who would sort of interact with Esmeralda and give us, not in an exposition way, because I hate that, but give us the information that we need in order to process what's going on. The other biggest shift really was in making more visceral kind of and more evident Frollo's crimes, because this is a corrupt religious figure, you know, who struggles a lot to balance his desires with his so-called commitment to his faith. He's also an alchemist in the book as well, so we've kind of alluded to that a little bit, but it's not the main drive of the story, other than to say that actually the alchemy kind of, the interest in alchemy kind of gives us an insight into the fact that he is fascinated by the idea of transformation, which I think runs through the novel quite a lot as well. And yeah, so we've made what is alluded to in the book much more explicit in terms of, you know, the fact that he feels sexual desire for Esmeralda and has no outlet, or no pleasant outlet, let's say. So that's a good thing to say as well. This is very much a kind of adult version. I was very aware from the start that I didn't want any of the characters to kind of speak in this kind of classical vogue, as it were. I wanted a sense of immediacy with the dialogue as well. So Esmeralda swears a lot as well, which is because why on earth wouldn't she, after everything she's been through, but also because I wanted to give her a little more agency back, rather than making her be the passive kind of adored object of the other characters who has no kind of say in what happens to her. I wanted her to feel and reflect what she'd been through, and to use her language to do that. And I guess the final biggest shift really was in the idea of Quasimodo himself. Now, obviously, there is, given the time, much like Richard III, really, by Shakespeare, there's no kind of definite explanation of what is the kind of, what would I say, medical condition or anything that is present in the characters, or so on and so forth. A lot of people have speculated, for instance, with Richard III, who, by the way, not a very accurate portrayal of the actual person, but hey-ho. A lot of people, for instance, have suggested scoliosis for Richard III, again, not confirmed by Shakespeare. And similar with Quasimodo, described as a hunchback, you know, so we have this kind of idea of what he will look like. And I thought two things. One, I thought that's not my story to write, for a start, not having that experience, it would be wrong. And the second one was, I thought what might be interesting is to look at the kind of social model of disability, which says, you know, so that people are disabled by society's attitudes to them and the way in which society is structured. So I actually thought maybe that's more interesting, to live in that kind of ambiguity, the idea that Quasimodo, who is not a real person, and obviously not based on a real person, and exists in the realm of fiction, was so feared and misunderstood by society that actually what they did was put the disability on him and kind of make him this figure that they could quantify, understand, and exert power over. But I thought, well, what happens if that's not actually the case? What happens if it's people's attitudes that have put them there, rather than anything physical or demonstrable or medical, whatever? So, yeah, that's kind of, you know, and those conversations are ongoing, aren't they? But I thought that was the way to deal with this with myself as the playwright, and not to steal the voice from someone else who has a lived experience of that. So yeah, from this huge kind of epic, it's gone into those four characters. and it's claustrophobic and it's immediate and it is very fast-paced and fast-moving. It's kind of flits from one location to the next through the magic of filmmaking, through skills that I don't have, but thankfully Stephen does. And yeah, so that's going to be happening at the end of this month. In fact, the exact dates I will flash up at the end of this video, and I will link all the information down below in the description, so that if you would like to get a ticket, you can do so. And watch it live. I believe it will probably be available afterwards as well. I'm not sure about the pricing at the moment, because I say I just write the words and then people make the magic happen, which is amazing of them. But yeah, so I hope that's been reasonably interesting insight into how I approached adapting the story, taking it from this huge sprawling yarn into something that feels immediate, performance ready, and still satisfying, but is not tied to the narrative of the book, because a performance is a different beast and we consume it differently. So yeah, if you're still here and you watched all that, I hope that was interesting. Go get yourself a ticket for Notre Dame from Threedumb Theatre, and I'll see you online when you're watching it. All right, my darlings, take care. Bye bye.